Hello, everybody. It's good to be sharing again, and something very profound happened yesterday when I was reflecting on yesterday's gospel about the two apostles on the road to Emmaus. And I believe that it was coming about because of my original reflections on the videos that I've been putting up and the things that I've been sharing, because they have stirred a lot of great memories and really activated the spirit again. And Jesus took the apostles up on the mountain and transfigured himself. The the apostles, that was for, they could return to that when they went back into the world afterwards. They could go back and remember those times and get that sense of the same spirit and that encouragement that they had received in those moments. And so that's what I was sensing over those, going back and reflecting over those videos, was the sense of being nearly back present in those times, and the sense of the light, the comfort, the encouragement, and the inspiration, and the presence of God's Spirit and Christ with us, walking with us, guiding us, and being very, very close, God being very close to us, and showing us a way, guiding us to a way to fulfill God's will for us. So very, very similar experiences, and we all go through that. It's not that you're making yourself anything like you're Peter, James, or John, but you're experiencing as a human being that same spirit that they were imbued with, and then they were sent to bring people like us to the same God and the same relationship, and receive the same spirit, who would do similar things for us. So, in a way, never ever think to yourself that by saying or talking or speaking about experiences that God, that you feel, or anybody should judge you on that, because that's what a witness is. You're a witness then, and you're then glorifying God by your witness, and that's very, very important. That you're glorifying God by your witness, and there's a humility there. The lack of humility is not to give God what he deserves, and he deserves everything. He deserves the worship, and he deserves the glory for everything that we do, because he is everything. Without him, we can do nothing. So to come on and share that on video, and to look at your life and see where he is there, that's not a proud. It's not being proud. It's being pretty wise in this world, because you begin to learn that that's exactly what God, why he came, and the men that he chose, he taught them the same, and these men went away and died for him, because they saw him to be God, and he was the be all of everything, the end of all, and the be all and end all of everything. So that was what I was seeing. That same 3.5 year period, and then being leveled like those apostles. And the very profound thing I saw was that Jesus comes to the apostles in a very subtle way. There's no fanfare. Don't forget, these men, this is the first time it's okay for us in hindsight with faith, but these men have saw the man whom they thought is, the Messiah, the chosen one of God. They had come to the point where they had seen Peter had said, "You're the Son of God, you're the Son of the living God, the Messiah." So they were beginning to believe that he is who he said he was, and who they believed he was. And so this belief was getting very strong, and you can imagine the happiness that those men must have felt before that. The joy, overwhelming joy of literally being a piece of heaven, because they're way the keen of heaven. That's, that's what heaven's about, being in the ecstasy and bliss of God in his heavenly glory. So you can imagine how they felt. And then the Lord has to really allow them to face reality, as he does with all of us, and me included. And he allows us to go through that sense of the reality of facing up to death and suffering. Because sin and death and suffering did not come into this world through Christ, which a lot of people believe, through God, that God is the instigator of all sin and suffering and death. They seem to forget, if you go in and you look at the first parents and before the fall, it was harmony with God. We just see harmony. And if you look at the book of Revelation, says, when God comes and he vanquishes the evil, then there'll be no more pain or suffering or tears. There'll be none of that. No more sin. So heaven's a place where there's no sin. So sin has brought the evil, the suffering, and death into the world. Heaven's a place of eternal bliss. And in the company of God and his angels and saints forever. And it'll be a place where it's not like going to mass and saying, God, they'll never get anything from that, and if that's heaven sort of thing, it's a bit boring. The people you read, the saints you read about, give their lives, give everything for the Lord, because they recognized the bliss and the heavenly goodness and everything they seek in life, of what's good comes from God, and fulfills them in every way. And their happiness and nature, when they see nature and the beauty of nature, it's God. When they see the beauty of a beautiful spouse, it's God. It's God created that beauty. The best friends that we have is God created that, the characteristics that we love. So everything that's going on around us they're only characteristics of what God is. So if you are having the people that you love the most to have around you, imagine you had a big party, a big banquet. And you would invite all the people that you love and met you because they touched you in some way, made you happy, or consoled you, or so that you take all all the people that would be at that banquet, there were the characteristics that make a heavenly bliss for you, make it a joy and a happiness to be there in that position forever. And can you imagine then that you could go to every location that you wanted, and nature and the world, and that's God's. So heaven's all of these things and more. So Paul says that the mind can't perceive, what God has in store for those who love him. So, so I'm trying to get to what the Lord was teaching me along the way about the Mass. And how the Mass is like heaven on earth, because it encapsulates the whole life of the Trinity, and it encapsulates the whole life of those who loved the Trinity, especially our Blessed Mother, most of all, who loved their Son more, the greatest apostle than any apostle. And we get to see her life reflected as well. All the saints, all the angels, that stand before the Lord in heaven. Like one angel, you take one angel would be like, can you imagine going to visit the president or the queen, or go and visit the Pope? How overwhelming that would be, or how much of a privilege you would feel to be in the company and going into a palace, or going into the White House, or going to the Vatican. the privilege you would feel of that, and the people that you would meet, and the special being part of. So think what it would be like to be in the courts of the Lord, the King, and to be close to him, So and learning from him, and being a servant, and not only a servant but a friend, a friend of the Lord. You imagine being a friend of the King, and your life and how you would feel, and that in that service, and here you it's in service to the King of Heaven, and and let's look again at the what the King of Heaven is capable of doing and creating the whole universe and everything there. So any multiverse or whatever it is, anything that God created it, so there's nothing God did not create. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and nothing came to be only through the Word. So everything's created, including us, for God, and out of God's good pleasure, out of pure love. He doesn't need anything from us, or does he need anything from the world? The world can't do anything that would make God change in any way, because he's perfectly good. There's no change in God. Perfect love. There's no change at all. He doesn't need for anything, So it's us that needs God. When we worship God, it's good for us, because we're fulfilling what we're created to do. And when we do what we're created to do and doing God's will, we're fulfilling what we're created to do. And therefore we find that happiness, joy, even amidst the reality that we're on earth, and we're in a hostile place. And we need God, and that's why God gave us all these gifts of the sacraments in preparation for the spiritual battle and journey through life, and given a free will to prove our love to God. And we can choose to either love him or refuse that love, and do our own thing. And this is, you see, this is what I've been being taught. I was being taught for all the years, but I'm seeing that again reflected over the 5 years I've done for those reflections for video. So I'm seeing again this need for the learning, how much we need to learn about why we're here. That it's only in God and Christ that we know what we're here for. It makes life life gives life purpose. We find our purpose for life only in God and Christ. So we know what we're about, and he'll teach you that, and he taught the apostles that, and that's what I was getting to. Again, there was that's what he was teaching them that, and the most important thing we see is the establishment of the Mass, the very beginnings of the Mass, the initial stages, and we see that if you can imagine the Last Supper, and Jesus is breaking the bread, and he breaks the bread, he thanks God, and he says, "Take this, all of you, and eat from it, for this is my body, which will be given up for you." This is my body, which will be given up for you. "And take this cup, all of you, and drink from it, for this is the blood of the new covenant, which will be shed for you and for many, so that sins may be forgiven." So these are the last words and testament of the Lord. And you can imagine first of all, because what we forget is when we start to look at God and we have faith, and we've never been living up to faith, we're not seeing him as very, very important. You imagine if you're living with a person who you loved most in your life, the greatest idol worship you have in the world, the person that has done so much for you, and imagine what it was like to lose them, and you would remember their last will and testament. You'd remember their last words if they were directed towards you personally. And this is what the apostles, Jesus is doing with the apostles when he returns. And he's very subtly, not with great fanfare to overwhelm them. He's gently teaching them, because they would be overwhelmed, like when he came into the other apostles with the upper room. He was speaking at it, but they were so incredulous at what they were seeing, and understandably so. But the others here, he's more gentle. He's not breaking the bruised reed, and that's what he does with us when we're in those same positions, that darkness or despair, or no matter who it is, no matter who that is, the Lord will not break the bruised reed, and he comes, if he's allowed, gently, and the apostles recognize him at the breaking of the bread. So this is what has been so profound and important to me, and because I've always found the Mass so important, the Eucharist and the Word of God, and that is that the very last thing they remember of him was the breaking of the bread, and he's brought back to their memory this remembrance. Do this in memory of me. Do this in memory. And imagine, strange so to say, that the very last thing they see and the very first thing they see with the risen Christ, the greatest event in the history of mankind and the world, is Jesus overcoming death and raising himself from death. And what do they get from it amidst this overwhelming vision? And imagine what the mind's going through, but they recognise him in the breaking of the bread. And the reason I say that is because when you go back to the Acts of the Apostles, so in a very short space of time later, you begin to read that the apostles are breaking the bread. And that's the initial stages of the Mass. And Jesus is forming the future priesthood in the apostles by imbuing into their minds the importance of breaking the bread in memory. And not only the breaking of the bread, but his words that this is my body, this is my blood. And I'm sure they would they reflected back then to what we would read in John's Gospel, John 6, where Jesus says, and the Jews start to think he's speaking of cannibalism. And you know what the Jews were like against blood of any kind. So, I mean, it would have been disgusting and they would have turned away from this. But Jesus did not say how long, I'm only speaking symbolically. Because the theologians that I was taught with were able to go back and relate the Aramaic word and the Greek words for that, not the English word, but the original words, and the meaning of the original words were to gnaw upon. And Jesus used those words, which made it clear what he was talking about. He was talking about gnawing, eating his body. That was his body, and you would gnaw on it. And that was the reason why most of the rest of the people that were listening walked away and left him. This teaching's too hard. And that's what people do today. And that's why it's very, 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 it's impossible unless we have faith, unless we can enlighten faith in people. And I mean, that faith comes from God. He gave that faith to the apostles, and they experienced that, and they experienced the importance, the primary importance of what they were doing, because after that becomes the be all and end all, is the community, the gathering, and the reflection on who Jesus is the Messiah. And he's already explained to them. He's fulfilled the scriptures, and he's opened up their minds to the scriptures by revealing where he was in the scripture, which was hidden until Jesus came. It was hidden. Paul talks about that. He brings the message that was hidden until now, after Jesus rises, and he opens up the minds, and they begin to see all the prophets and the lawmakers were pointing towards him. And Moses, he talked about another greater than him would come. King David, my Lord says to my Lord, so there was somebody greater than him, and he knew that there would be somebody come who would be greater than him. Isaiah, but the point was they thought it was going to be a great political leader, someone like Moses, and David, warrior kings, and he had to take them back and open up the scriptures to where he was spoken of, where he was revealed through Isaiah as the suffering servant, and that he would die a horrible, cruel death, and it would be so horrible that you would turn away from him. The pain and suffering of him, because like the apostles, like the rest of us, I never signed up for this. This is, and he shows us that reality, that this is the reality of what he came to do to save us. He's no a big powerful king and a hero, which we all love to were hero worshippers. And he said that he would be rejected. He says he came in the name of the Father, but someone will come in their own name and you'll choose them. You'll never choose him. And that's very profound. That we like to choose the hard or the tough or the person who's doing all the... And Jesus, the only reason Jesus done all the miracles was to prove that he was of God. Jesus in every other way was humble and loving and concerning and compassionate and good to every single person. There was no hatred. There was no hatred to anybody. And there was no one-man upship on anybody. He taught everybody to be equal. And suffered out of and sacrificial love, which like mothers do for their kids, parents do for kids. That sacrificial love, give up things for them for the sake of them. It's all Christ-like. And this is what he's teaching them, and he goes through Isaiah, by his wounds you're healed, by his stripes you're healed. The Lamb of God, lamb led to the slaughter. They saw this, and he opened the whole scriptures up, and that's why they talk about those things later in the Acts of the Apostles, because he's opened the minds, and they know who he is. They are steadfast, firm on who he is because of that. And I was the same when I went into the monastery. After my three and a half years, when I went in the monastery in the Feast of Divine Mercy, and I thought it was that. Dom Angus asked me to take on a 2-year novitiate. After 2 months, I was able to go into the library because they felt, well, he's in 2 months. He's, that's what he hasn't ran it. He's stuck it this far, so he could be. There could be a vocation there for him to become a monk. So we'll see if he wants to take on a 2-year novitiate. Let him discern. But after the 2 months, I was allowed to go into the libraries and stuff. It was a bit freer because those other 2 months wasn't allowed nothing. See nobody, get nothing. Just see if I could, if it would fit in. But I thought this is what God has called me for, because I went to the monastery, believing wholeheartedly. I'd left everything. God called me, and I got up and I followed. And I says, I'll go to the monastery because I believe he's calling me, and if he's calling me, I'll be there as long as he wants me to be. And that was the words I spoke before I went in. I'll be there as long as the Lord wants me to be there. So the point I'm making in that is that it wasn't the vocation he was calling me for, but I went in there as a very select place where he could teach me personally and what he was doing, what he was planning for me, away from the world and away from distraction. And so he taught me when I was in there the very same thing. When I went in, I started to learn all those things about the Psalm 22, and my Lord, why have you forsaken me, and why, the Lord explained those and fulfilled those words on the cross. And the lamb, the unblemished lamb, not a, there's no sickness or no bones broken. He fulfilled that, fulfilled the scriptures. We're speaking to him. And when the apostles got this, it was overwhelmingly convincing. And the same as me, I was overwhelmingly convinced by that. Dear goodness me, he's right through the scriptures. The whole prophecy has been about him since day one. And here he is, he's fulfilled all of it. Convinced, absolutely convinced. So I learned that in the monastery, and that gave me my strength of faith back against that awful, what the apostles went through to, that awful time of feeling separated and hopeless and no plans dashed, So he set me on a course again, and you become again like those men. They go back and you go back for your mission. So they go back and they start to, like me, they go back and the first thing the Lord's teaching them is the importance of the Word and the importance of the Eucharist. And the primary importance of that, the par excellence of that, is the Mass and the consecration by the priest of the Eucharist, by the bread and the wine, during the consecration of the transubstantiation, which changes the bread and the wine from into the substance of Christ himself, body, blood, soul, and divinity, substantially present there in that Eucharist. And when the priest raises at the consecration and raises the host, that's the adoration that goes on, that's going on in heaven, that you read in the book of Revelation. It's the same Lord, and he's being worshipped in the same way on earth as it is in heaven. And we'll see that, all the symbolism. You go to a Catholic Mass, you'll see all that symbolism there, as you don't see anywhere else. You see the temple worship from the Jews, who would have understood that symbolism. But you look at that today and go to a Catholic Mass, and you'll see the vestments, the priests and the vestments, and the altar and the lamb on the altar and the lampstands and the candles and the light and the dark and the sacrifice and the wedding feast. That's all the sacrifice of the Mass. It's Jesus' encapsulated whole life and whole plan of God is going on in the liturgy of the sacrifice of the Mass. And Christ is there present, and we're adoring him present there. And there's angels there, and you have, Blessed Michael, and you get all these prayers of the Blessed Michael, all in the Catholic faith, So, that absolutely convinces me, and learning that along the way, I see that that importance of that sacrifice, because it's everything, because it encapsulates why we're here. So the main thing was even to think about that yourself. Think about that yourself, even somebody who doesn't believe. And they're looking into Christianity, and they're looking into, was Jesus a real person, and even to look and see if he was a real person, and begin like the first apostles and the first disciples, the first Jews, you're Jeremiah, or you're Elijah. They thought he was a prophet. They were gradually getting faith. We weren't there yet, but they were getting it all right. And in the presence of God, they were starting to see that he was as great as Elijah, and he was as great Jeremiah, Elijah, John the Baptist. So this is how it's in the presence of God and in the presence of others, and the hearing, as St. Paul says, he didn't say, you get faith by reading about it. He says you get faith by hearing. So we go and faith is nourished by hearing the spiritual reading, the scriptures and spiritual reading. So the faith gets strengthened in that. So, and then he says, how are you going to hear if you don't have preachers? So how are they going to know about God if how are they going to believe if there's no preacher there to preach to them? They can't hear it without a preacher. And then so how are they going to start to even believe? And that's where you get the Mass. It encapsulates the whole redemptive plan of God from Genesis right through to Revelation. So I'll leave it at that, because I don't want to sort of go off and go off on a tangent. The most important thing was for me was this: the breaking of the bread was, if you can imagine the last thing Jesus done, and then can you imagine meeting Jesus when he rose from the dead? The only thing anybody's ever done in humankind ever to raise themselves from the dead, only God can do that. And they knew, like St. Thomas, that he was our Lord and our God. And they recognise him in that breaking of the bread. And you see very clearly, that's no me telling you, it's, go to the scriptures. And you'll find that then later they break the bread. And St. Paul then, you see St. Paul talking on the night Jesus was betrayed, he took the cup, he took the bread, and he broke it, and he took the cup. And St. Paul then goes in and he starts, and they start you get the beginnings of the Mass. And later then you start to commit, the apostles start to bring in, and the saints, you start to find that liturgy coming in, and the establishment of, the sacraments. Jesus is ordaining, the apostles are given that authority to forgive sins. Those whose sins you forgive are forgiven. Jesus spoke these words with his authority, and then he gave the apostles his authority. So when you go to, or their friends, when they would have came, or anyone else that was coming, they knew that God had given them the authority to do what they were doing. And it's the same today. The priest knows whose authority it is, because they'll even say that, by the authority, of the church, that they're commissioned with that authority. So, when I go to confessions, I know that the priest is acting in persona Christi. When the priest is on the altar and breaks the bread, he's acting in the person of Christ. So he is. I believe that. I believe it wholeheartedly. The church teaches it, but I've also experienced that. In a way, God, the Lord has done things for me to bring me to the faith in that, and it's powerful, and that's why I'll finish. Truly, that's why I've spent, maybe instead of hundreds of hours, I think in 25 years, I maybe spent thousands of hours before the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament. I would have done a 7-hour vigil for the Sisters of Adoration in Belfast. I used to do 7-hour vigil there and loved it. When I went to Youth 2000 retreats, I remember doing 3 days with a brother at the time from the Legionaries of Christ, and him and me spent three days in adoration of the Lord. I still can't comprehend that at the moment. I think there was about an hour or two that we went to dinner and come back, and then we adored again. 3 full days. That's what we done, or showed our love and the attraction of the Lord and the Blessed Sacrament. So it was him attracting us. What you see is just a monstrance with a white round piece of bread host. But If I seen a white bread piece of a white piece of bread in my cupboard in there, you know, I wouldn't be spending hours adorning it because it has no power. The Eucharist had the power of attraction, the power of that love, and the power of healing for me. I've been in the present, the power of peace. My peace I leave you, my peace I give you, not the peace of the world. When I was in that presence of God, I was understanding that, yeah, this is the peace that he's talking about.